So I've been on a major PS1 kick lately, as you could probably tell. I don't know what it is, maybe the graphics are just charming to me, and I mean we're currently working through Driver and Twisted Metal, and I've got a few other projects on the way too, all on PS1. The reason I say this is that today's game is one I really loved back in the day for PS1, and it's fully responsible for sparking my interest in World War II history. That game is Medal of Honor. And the story of how Medal of Honor came to be is very interesting and tumultuous on its own. In 1995, Steven Spielberg, along with Microsoft, created DreamWorks Interactive. A few years later, while Spielberg was working on Saving Private Ryan, a passion project of his became known. He held a meeting with the staff outlining a first-person shooter set in World War II. He'd gotten the idea while watching his son play GoldenEye. The meeting was pretty heated, and according to Peter Hirschman, Paul came in and laid it out on the table. We just sat there and let him speak. He didn't know anything about the game, but laid out a case. When it comes to Medal of Honor, it's a serious and sacred thing. You don't just turn it into a game. It's an awful thing to do. And he really made a compelling case that we shouldn't be doing this. Corporate management was also worried that World War II was dated and kids were more interested in lasers and demons. Of course, that's referring to Doom. The studio hired Dale Dye as a military advisor for the developers. If you like World War II movies and media, you'll know who Dale Dye is. But just in case you don't know, he played Colonel Sink in Band of Brothers and Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway, along with voicing various characters in Battlefield 2, Modern Combat, Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Rising Sun, and European Assault. When looking at the first demo, Dye criticized it as exploitative and irresponsible, but stayed with the project because he believed the studio had honorable intentions, leading him to improve the game's historical authenticity with nostalgic and educational segments. The team then had to make further changes due to the Columbine Massacre, which alone put video games under severe scrutiny. I'm unsure what they changed exactly, but this is probably why the game includes zero blood and gore, which in my opinion isn't all that terrible. And on top of all of that, Paul Bucca, president of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, criticized them for using such a sacred and important symbol as the Medal of Honor in a video game. Luckily though, a demo was shown to Bucca, convincing him of the game's seriousness and gaining the endorsement of the Medal of Honor Society. Around the time of release in 1999, DreamWorks Interactive was sold to Electronic Arts due to losses during Medal of Honor's development. But the light at the end of the tunnel here is that Medal of Honor was a hit. It was received very well, with review scores between 7.9 and 9.3 out of 10. Along with a bunch of 5-star ratings, people really liked this game. GamePro called Medal of Honor one of the year's top titles and a must-won game, praising it for having some of the most tense first-person action ever delivered on PlayStation. Next Generation called it the best PlayStation first-person shooter in ages, and PSM said that the game was an extraordinary game with no equal on PlayStation. I don't know about all of you, but with those glowing endorsements, I'm really excited to get into it. Does anyone remember Medal of Honor? First things first, Medal of Honor's story is built using real history, places, and events as its backbone. Before and after every mission, the game will give you a mini lesson on an aspect of World War II that directly pertains to your mission. For example, there's a mission where you're in Norway and you need to destroy containers of heavy water along with the plant making it. Without getting too far into it, heavy water is, well, water with all the hydrogen atoms changed to deuterium. And Hitler needed this for his atomic project. And just like all the other levels in the game, this one is based off true events. In real life, a group of Norwegian commandos scaled the mountains and destroyed the plant. Then resistance members planted a timed explosive on the ferry, sinking it along with all of its heavy water cargo, essentially halting the Axis atomic bomb project in its tracks. This concept of using real-life history as a springboard is great in my opinion, and it does a stellar job of instilling the importance of the mission and why you're doing it. It's much better than if they had made a reason up. So you play as fictional character James Patterson, who was recently recruited by the OSS to carry out some sneaky espionage and subterfuge along with the Maquis, or French resistance. And I say with loosely as I'm the only one doing anything. All jokes aside, the woman that briefs you, Manon Baptiste, is a member of said resistance, and the main character of Underground. She and her contacts gather intel for you for the mission at hand. Speaking of which, I always find it funny when games try to tell you how to do something in a very serious way, but make it look really silly and out of place. Another example of this is Metal Gear Solid. It just always makes me smirk while pulling me out of the game a bit. it. Sometimes these briefings treat you like you're dumb. I'll give you a throbbing box. But then I remember that this is the early days of 3D FPS games, where everything is new and experimental, so it's understandable that they would assume you know nothing, cause back then you really wouldn't have. Before we go too far, I want to get the weapons out of the way. Medal of Honor boasts 11 authentic weapons, and every weapon on offer here will be very familiar to anyone who's played an FPS game in, the last 20 years or so, and the weapon models themselves all look pretty good, well, at least for the time. There are a few oddities like the M1 Garand missing its rear sight aperture, or the silenced pistol suppressor looking too large and bent or off-center. But when you pull these guns out, you can easily tell what every single one is supposed to be, so it's not a big deal and it's well done. First up, we have the pistols. In this game, there are 3. The silenced pistol, or PPK, the P38, and the 1911. The silenced pistol is honestly pretty shit, unless you know how to use it properly. You only get it on levels where you're in disguise, so treating it like the other pistols just doesn't work. The best strategy is to walk right up to a guard, then quick draw, taking them out in one easy shot. Very effective, but beyond that it's god-awful. If you alert everyone, there's almost no point in fighting, because the silenced pistol takes about 5 to 7 shots to kill one dude. The P38 and 1911 are basically the same in function, they just look and sound different, and they're actually quite effective in a pinch, but again, they're still pistols and they're very weak, so you're better off just using your other guns. You know, come to think of it, ammo is plentiful in this game, and it carries over across stages, so unless you're firing all your guns all the time, missing everything and using up all your ammo in the process, there's no need to really even have these in the game. But then again, I suppose it wouldn't really be a World War II shooter without at least one iconic pistol from the era, now would it? The rifles, on the other hand, are incredibly useful. They consist of the M1 Garand, the Springfield Sniper, and the BAR. And aside from the bazooka, the Springfield is technically the most powerful gun in this game shot per shot. But I've had many times where it took 2 shots to the body to take an enemy down. The M1 Garand is slightly less powerful but more versatile. But there's something that's off about the M1 Garand. Can you guess what it is? Yeah, there's no ping. Seems like a very obvious thing you really wouldn't want to leave out. But in all honesty, there's not a huge need for it, and I think we've all become a bit too obsessed with the M1 ping, thanks to Hollywood and modern video games. Looking at you, Call of Duty. The final rifle is the BAR. This behemoth is a decently accurate, super powerful death machine able to mow down entire groups of enemies in seconds. I mean, what else did you expect from what is essentially a fully automatic M1 Garand? But funnily enough, the BAR in this game doesn't share an ammo pool with the M1 like you'd think. Instead, it shares ammo with SMGs, which obviously is incorrect. I mean, could you imagine a bar firing the Lord's caliber? That would be insanity. The War Crime Stick, or Trench Gun, is Medal of Honor's only shotgun. This beast is only good in close quarters. It's pump action, very inaccurate, and has a long reload. It's a typical video game shotgun. For SMGs, you have the MP40 and Thompson, and there honestly isn't that much of a difference between the two. The only difference is that the fire rate on the Thompson is much faster than that of the MP40, but in my experience playing through the game, I didn't really feel as though one was better than the other. They both lay waste to anyone downrange with brutal efficiency. The final 2 weapons are the grenade and bazooka. The grenade comes in 2 different variations, the potato masher and the standard American Mark II grenade. And throwing them can be a bit janky. Okay, in most games you aim and throw, right? The grenade is always thrown at the same velocity. But in Medal of Honor, not only do you need to aim it, but the longer you hold the fire button, the more power you'll throw it with. This is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's wicked to have an option on how far you want to toss it, but on the other hand, it makes for a lot of bad throws. Sometimes they won't go far enough, while other times you'll toss them into the next village. It seemed to always take me at least 2 throws to hit my mark. And even then, you could always just use your gun to get the job done more efficiently. And lastly, the bazooka, and this weapon is a whole other weird beast on its own. It's very difficult to use, at least for me, in the heat of the moment, and it's the only weapon whose crosshairs lock to the center of the screen when you aim. Kinda like what you'd see in modern games, while every other gun has a floating reticle, similar to GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, or The World Is Not Enough. The aiming sensitivity is also higher than all the other guns too. At least that's the way it feels, it's a totally different aiming style. So my question is, why? Why not have all the guns aim like this, or have the bazooka aim like all the rest? It just throws you off. Every time I used this weapon, I needed a moment to readjust to the new aiming style. Most times I just end up firing a rocket into the wall right beside me, sending me back to the beginning of the stage. The bazooka is just more of a hassle than it's worth, so I didn't really use it all that much till the last level. That being said, sending enemies flying is always a good time. Medal of Honor has 7 levels with 3 or 4 stages each. And just for reference, the first mission takes place 6 days after D-Day, where you start on a dark path in the middle of the woods. And the first thing you'll notice is that the default control scheme is very counterintuitive and bad. So what you'll want to do is quit and go back to the main menu, then go to options and change the controls to preset 4. Don't even look at the others, they don't matter. Most of them were designed for controllers that didn't have the joysticks. So 4 is the one, trust me. After that, the game control's pretty good. I mean, of course, there's still that old school game jank, but nothing you can do about that. And overall, Control Scheme 4 makes it passable. The first level has you make your way through the countryside into a village, and it's a pretty solid first level. You simply run around shooting bad guys on your way to the end of the level. Simple. The objectives here are pretty hard to miss. Unlike the second stage where it took me forever to find the radio transmitter. I scoured the entire level for about 30 minutes, but I still couldn't find it. It turns out it was all the way at the start, and I just missed the door to the room it was in. Oh, I see. This is one of those games where you can miss an objective, and if you do, it's on you to retrace your steps and find it. There are no markers or anything to help you either, so you really need to pay attention. Luckily, objectives are mostly always in order. What I've noticed is the order in which they're displayed in the pause menu is the order in which you have to complete them, meaning you shouldn't be completing Objective 2 until you've completed Objective 1. And of course, there are levels that break this trend, but those are uncommon. The second level of the game introduces a stealth and disguise mechanic, where instead of shooting everybody, you have to acquire the correct papers in order to gain access to further parts in the level. These parts are a dual-edged sword. On one hand, they're very unique and intense, offering a break from all the shooting, but on the other hand, the AI can be finicky, and the silenced pistol they give you may as well just be a pea shooter, but we already went over that. The third stage of level 2 introduces one major issue I have with the entire game, and that is its overall insane darkness. You can't see 6 feet in front of your face sometimes. Adding to that, the fact that in this level you're confined to a linear path with MGs set up along it, into the mountain face. You can circumvent them, but if you miss the pathways to do so, which I often did, you're likely to take many hits before you even see where you're getting shot from. It got to the point where I may as well have turned off my TV. Now I get that a lot of games from the PS1 era did this type of stuff to smooth and hide the pop-in and make the short draw distance more natural looking, but it's still frustrating nonetheless. The game may not look extremely dark, but that's because I've brightened up the image a lot for you guys. And at certain times I had to resort to just feeling my way along the walls to get to the end. I even tried the game on an old CRV TV, that's a tube TV for you young'uns, because that can sometimes be why older games appear too dark. And it was brighter, but not by much. And just to be clear, I'm playing on all original hardware. In level 3, there's a portion where you have to sabotage the ship you've stowed away on. This is where the disguise mechanics become very tedious. I was doing well until I walked by a guard requesting to see my papers, so I showed them and went on my merry way, only to discover I'd walked to a dead end. So I turn around and walk past the same guard, assuming he didn't need to check them again, cause why would he? Boy was I wrong, he yelled alarm and hosed me down with his MP40. And by the time I made it to level 4, I had come to the conclusion that most of the levels on offer here are actually pretty good. This one specifically has you running around the forest at night. I mean, there are soldiers in the trees, checkpoints, compounds, hidden machine guns, everything. You just blow things up and you get a very large arsenal to blow people away with. The M1, grenades, shotgun, and Thompson. And I don't know why, but I enjoyed this level a lot, more so than most of the others. That being said, one major downside, again, is that you can hardly see anything. I know I've already mentioned it, but the darkness is such a huge piss off for me. It's the only thing that constantly kneecaps the entire experience, making awesome moments tedious. The second stage of this level has you shooting your way through a bunker, and you can actually see. Any level in a bunker is where the game truly shines, no pun intended. But you can actually see what's going on, which is a big step up. And this game just generally performs better in these tight environments. Not to mention, the devs can add a lot of detail where they otherwise couldn't in the larger environments. At this point in the game, enemies start to throw a lot of grenades. I mean, it's not a massive issue as they sometimes hit the wall they're beside, killing themselves, but other times you're in the heat of a gunfight blasting away and one of them throws one and of course you can't hear it and you didn't notice it because you're busy blasting away and it kills you. On that note, the German grenades blend in with bunkers well, so even if you're not in a fight and you don't hear it land, you probably won't see it. A good rule of thumb from this point on, which is stage 2, is to always wait a few seconds before moving in after a gunfight. Stage 1 of level 5 is a confusing gaggle of poorly lit hallways and rooms, and up until this point I haven't mentioned the parts where you need to crawl through air ducts or small cave entrances, and I'll say, unless you know the layout of these parts, you're better off spinning around and facing where you entered to just feel your way along the walls till you pop out on the other end, because it's so dark, so completely pitch black that I'm not even sure how else you'd do it. But this level is where the game unleashes all the MP40 guys on you all at once, almost like it was saving them all for now. And these guys are extremely dangerous. They can kill you in an instant, even more so when the game sends 2 or 3 of them after you at once, which it often does, especially in this level. I mean, man, they're everywhere, and when they pile up, they're very difficult to hit without getting hit yourself. The final level of stage 5 is by far my favorite level. You simply have to fight your way down to the docks, destroying a few trucks and a generator before finally sabotaging the ferry, completing the mission. But what sets this level aside for me is the fact that it's in the snow. I don't know why and I can't explain it, but I just love the way snow looks on PS1 and N64, especially when it's at night. The contrast is just charming to me. It's over embellished and the draw distance, it just really works well together. It reminds me of the first level in Siphon Filter 2, or even Surface 2 in GoldenEye when I played it as a kid. I also don't know if this is a reference to something or just a funny little thing, but in this stage, down one of the optional side paths, you can find a few soldiers just chilling around a snowman. Hey, look, Frosty the National Socialist Snowman. Level 6 is where the difficulty really rockets into the fucking stratosphere. The first stage takes place again in the snow, but it's really dark, and by now the allure of the snow has worn off. This stage is nowhere near as fun or atmospheric as the end of level 5. It was also at this point where the PS1 jank really started to get to me. Starting on this level till the end of the game, enemies are way more numerous and carry way better weapons, demanding more of me than the jank would allow. This led to a lot of cheap deaths and even more frustration. On the topic of PS1 jank, Medal of Honor has a few oddities that really irritate me. First off, you're constantly getting stuck on the level geometry, causing you to stutter and skip around. Walking anywhere near boxes or props is the absolute worst. It's like there's an invisible wall a few inches above every surface in the game made of flypaper or GI paper. Moving past that, when running around, your gun jitters in a really weird way. I thought it was a bug until I did some testing, and to the best of my knowledge, it's just the auto-aim. So the auto-aim works similar to GoldenEye, where your gun just automatically aims towards any enemies that are within a certain area on your screen. With that in mind, the jittery gun seems to be the auto-aim picking up enemies through the level geometry but can't decide which one to aim at. This screws you over so much, because it doesn't seem to be purely visual. You constantly miss even at point blank with an M1. Oh, and while we're talking about the aiming, using aim mode, or what is essentially ADS as we know it now, is very important later on in the game and can save a lot of health and headache. But even then, the aiming seems off. Not your reticle placement or anything, but just where the bullets go. There were many times where I was aiming at an enemy while another enemy was near where I was aiming, and my shots just seemed to go off the reticle, towards the guy I wasn't trying to shoot. This alone is responsible for more loss of life than anything else in the game. So in short, the auto-aim is bad and aiming manually is only slightly better. Stage 2 and 3 of level 6 unleash Panzerschreck wielding enemies in large quantity. These guys can one-shot you from anywhere. These cheap shots most often come from the black void beyond the render distance. I died multiple times on the final level of this stage alone. But I will say, there is a hint of suspense to it. This stage puts all your skill and experience to the test. One rocket sends you all the way back. So you either need to be quicker than the enemies, know where they are, or be lucky. Rocket guys aside, stage 2 and 3 are pretty decent. And your objectives are pretty standard too, like save artwork, defuse bombs, take out a demolition squad, and find a key. That I missed and could not find for the life of me. I had to go onto a forum that was posted the year this was released and read one of those old school walkthroughs, which was a whole other ordeal in itself. If you've ever had to read one of those old school walkthroughs, you know exactly what I mean. If you haven't and you're younger, just imagine YouTube tutorials but all in text, but it's a big block paragraph and you gotta find where you are and follow all the steps. And even then, I found out the key was on a table in a dark room where one of the demo squad members was. I just blasted him and kept going. I never would have had any reason to search that room, but I guess that's how they get ya. Well, we're finally here, level 7, and while there isn't a whole lot to say about stage 1, I will say this, and I know I've talked multiple times about the lack of light in this game, and to be clear, it's still way too dark, but the lighting, when there is lighting, is absolutely immaculate, at least for a PS1 game. In the first stage of this level, you walk down a hallway where work is being done on some V2s through a window, and it just looks amazing. The way the light flickers as you walk down the hallway, just watch out, there's a German on the other side who will blast you if you're not ready. Stage 2 is an absolute endurance test. Everyone has an MP40, it's even worse than level 5, and they're always waiting in ambush, not to mention there's a massive quantity of them. They always seem to bunch up on the same corner, and as far as I can tell, you can't shoot through them while their death animations are happening. This makes it a real pain to get all of them without taking a lot of damage in the process. Stage 3 of level 7 is by far the most difficult part in the entire game. The difficulty ramps up to 11, even more than it did before. And this part feels downright cheap, to be honest. Right off the hop, you have to take out a seemingly endless number of enemies. I died here many times, without even getting close, so naturally I thought I was doing it wrong. So I looked it up and the walkthrough said not to use the MG, which makes sense as MGs spawn more enemies and they leave you very exposed. Then, get this, it suggested using cheats because this part is way too hard. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it said. I shit you not, it actually said that. But you know what? Screw that. Mom ain't raised no bitch. And at this point, I was way too invested and determined to just cheat on the last level. So after many more failed attempts, I developed a strategy. There's a guy who spawns right behind you with an MP40, so if you're not aware or ready, he can decimate half your health before you have any time to react. Bearing this in mind, here's what I'd do. I walk forward, take out the first few, walk forward a bit more, spin around, and kill that rat. Then I'd proceed to rocket spam. Since I hadn't been using my bazooka all that much, I had a good stockpile of rockets. I also used a lot of grenades, and it actually worked out really well. The AI seemed to prioritize throwing the grenades back over shooting you, so you can easily throw another while they scramble. Once I got this down, I realized it's actually a very easy and very short level, as long as you forget about guns and have enough grenades and rockets, that is. There are only 2 areas, and once you take out everyone in the first area, you have to blow up some crates and proceed to the next. At this point, there are about, 5 guys in the second area, and you're on top of a hill, so you can easily just lob grenades or shoot them without issue. Then you make your way around to the launch terminal and launch the sabotaged rocket. Then you wait a few seconds and boom, the rocket comes back down, explodes, and you're all done. Roll credits. It is funny how after you launch the rockets, a few random scientists just materialize out of nowhere and start freaking out. Or cheering it on? Or both. It kinda looks like they're dancing, that's what I'm saying. I haven't really said too much on this, but while I was playing through the game, I noticed a lot of cool things, especially with the AI. The first thing I'll say is that for the time, it seems pretty sophisticated. When you damage them enough, they'll shoot at you from the ground and get back up after a rest. They'll fall back to cover if you're flanking, they'll prone, they'll blind fire and throw grenades from cover, and they'll dive away from grenades. But the coolest thing is that if you toss a grenade at them, they'll try to throw it back or kick it away. You can tell the devs put a lot of work into how the AI react to certain things in the world. Shit, even dogs pick up grenades that you've thrown and bring them back to their handler, blowing them both up. This blew my mind when it happened for the first time. I had to review my footage just to make sure I was actually seeing it, and sure enough, look, I threw a grenade, the dog picks it up, runs off with it, and blows up. This type of stuff certainly isn't unique by today's standards, but for PS1, this was next level. And as far as I know, Medal of Honor is the first game to do this type of stuff. On that note, the enemies' death animations are pretty wicked, well detailed, and varied. The only downside is that you can't walk over or shoot through them till these animations are done, creating a roadblock or even cover for another enemy. On open levels, this isn't a huge deal, but on close quarters ones like the bunker, it's a real piss off. And okay, I know I've been putting the AI up on a pedestal, and make no mistake, it's nowhere near perfect, and enemies can be incredibly dumb. In some instances, they'll just not react to you, getting shot at or having grenades thrown at them. Sometimes they'll even jump towards grenades. There were also a few times during my playthrough where enemies would just get stuck and run in place, or run in circles, which is really funny. Overall though, the AI was definitely ahead of its time. Jank aside, it's still really good. And you know what else is really good? The sound design. I played the entire game set to ambience only, and I mean man, this is the optimal way to play. The devs did an incredible job in this area. For example, the sewer stage during the first level. Everyone up top is looking for you and you can hear it. Soldiers are shouting and running, dogs are barking, and whistles are blowing. It really sets the mood and adds a bunch of atmosphere. I mean the music probably does too, but I played without it so I wouldn't know. And apparently I missed out because after I finished the game, I read that the soundtrack for this game was considered one of the best World War II video game soundtracks ever. And man, I wish I'd known that before I turned it off. Now I feel like I missed out. The main theme is most likely the song they're referring to. It's the most notable song in the game, and it does an amazing job at setting a serious and solemn tone. This theme would later be remixed for Medal of Honor Frontline, and as far as I can tell, it's the only other game in the series that uses this song as its main theme. And both are great, but I like the Frontline version better. But now that I'm listening to them all, I can confidently say that they're all very solid songs that perfectly fit each situation they were made for. The further I got into this game, the more amazing I realized the sound design actually was. For instance, the first stage of level 3, you're on the Wolfram. The enemy knows you're there, so a soldier will come over the PA and tell you that if you surrender, they'll treat you humanely, which is obviously a lie. Or later in level 6, you can hear an officer and an art curator arguing over the PA, which if you read the briefing, you'll know that the curator is there against his will and is arguing for the preservation of the art before getting shot. Moments like these are just a really nice touch, and they really bring just that much more life into the game, which is always good. Last on the topic of sound design, I once again have to give kudos to the devs for making the weapons sound amazing. The pistols sound high-pitched and sharp, the MP40 has a chunk sound, and the sounds of rounds hitting surfaces around you is all well done. And I guess the devs thought they were great too, because I'm pretty sure they used these same sounds in other Medal of Honor games. I mentioned earlier that Spielberg sold DreamWorks Interactive to EA, and don't get me wrong, the whole franchise is remarkable, well, at least until 2010's Medal of Honor. But as I'm sitting here looking at this Medal of Honor footage and looking at these games sitting in front of me, I can only wonder how much better the Medal of Honor series may have been if Spielberg didn't sell. Because in the end, EA did what EA does best, taking great franchises and IPs and either destroying them or running them into the ground. But nonetheless, this game has been an absolute joy to play and write about, and I'm very glad I remember it. But what about all of you? Did you remember Medal of Honor? And would you give it a shot nowadays? And lastly, thank you all for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to check out what I'm doing here. And if you liked the video, be sure to leave a like and a sub, as it would really help the channel grow. I've got a bunch of videos in the works, but I need to know, what would you all like to see me cover? I'm always open to suggestions. As a matter of fact, I encourage them. And lastly, I'll see you in the next one, and have yourself a wonderful day.